Oh man, I guess I'm actually doing this. I've been talking about making videos like this for a while, and I think I'm actually gonna go through with it, so fingers crossed that this goes well. Okay, so starting things off, if you don't know me or you need a refresher, I'm Lauren the Flute. I am a video game musician. I play flute and I sing, and I lead a video game cover band called The Returners, and I'm trying to organize another band called the Megalovaniacs, which probably tells you a little bit about just how much I love Toby Fox's games. I streamed Undertale back when it was relatively new, and then have, I think, probably the world record for the slowest ever Deltarune playthrough. When I stream games, the things that I'm known for are, I guess, literary analysis, talking about feelings and making comparisons to things in the real world. I have an MFA in creative writing, which doesn't make me smarter or better than you, but it does mean that I have put a lot of thought and time into studying how stories are told, what makes them work. And so that's the perspective that I bring to streaming. That's the perspective that I bring, honestly, to like everything I do, whether I should or not. And that's the perspective that I'm going to bring here to this video right now. So this is called Comic Relief and Toby Fox. And I guess to start off, I feel like I should probably say, if you know me, you know I'm not really a comedy person. I don't really do humor. I tell people I don't have a sense of humor. So it's not a problem with comedy. It's not a problem with people who like humor. It's just a lot of times comedy and I just don't click, and that's fine. That's fine. Personally, it's a little funny to me that the first one of these like literary analysis videos I want to do is about comedy. But you know, one of the things that I love about Toby Fox's games is that even though humor doesn't usually land with me, like I have laughed so hard at his weird absurdity. There's just something about the guy's sense of humor that just does actually click with me. For whatever reason, Toby Fox tickles my funny bone, and I have no complaints about that. The other reason why I love Undertale as much as I do, and like, I mean, I love Undertale, can you tell? Mixed in with the humor, which is the first thing that you kind of encounter, I think, there's also this like beautiful, dark, tragic, emotional core underlying all of that. And I think especially in Deltarune, there's a lot of this beautiful seriousness mixed in with the absolutely absurd humor. Those are such great strengths individually. But I think what makes Toby Fox such an exceptional storyteller is that he has both of these halves so strongly in what he writes. And the two of them, they don't just coexist, they complement each other actively. They are more effective because they're paired together. So I don't think we necessarily think right off the bat when we think of comedy that it needs to have pathos, it needs to have tragedy to be effective and funny. And I don't think we tend to think of drama or tragedy as needing to have humor to be effective and powerful. But the truth of the matter is you really do. If you have a one-note story that leans too hard into just one of those sides, it's going to be a lot less effective than if you manage to deftly weave between the two and to incorporate elements of both, regardless of whether you're writing a comedy or drama, not tragedy, drama. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Toby Fox is extraordinarily good at balancing between the two and specifically deftly switching back and forth between the two. I feel like Undertale and Deltarune are both like a masterclass in comic relief, done as well as it can be done. As somebody who loves telling stories and experiencing stories, and especially as someone who myself, I do not specialize in comedy, I think I have a lot to learn from Toby Fox, and maybe you do too. So let's dive in. Okay, so before we do that, a quick note. I will not be discussing the No Mercy run in Undertale or the Snowgrave run in Deltarune, because I'm not playing those. I don't want to know about them. And this isn't up for negotiation, so please respect my my request about this. I'm a very serious person and I take these games really seriously, okay? Like, my friends are happy in their little worlds and I don't want to mess with that. Also, there are some things that I haven't seen that I don't know about because I didn't run into them in my playthrough, and that's fine. I'm not trying to give the 100% S rank version like analysis of every single thing that happens in the entire game series. Is it a series? So I'm not trying to know everything or learn everything, and I'm not claiming that I know everything. Basically, I'm just sharing my thoughts about the game and my, I guess, analysis of the literary devices that Toby Fox is using based on my own knowledge and my own experiences. Your experiences may be different, your opinions might be different, and that's totally fine. I really want to encourage you to have your own thoughts and your own feelings, and if you disagree with me, that's totally all right. My goal with this is to share my thoughts, share what I've learned and what I've thought about it, and giving you something that you can think about, that you can ask yourself how you feel about, kind of maybe hold it up against your own experience and see where you stand on that. I don't think you should ever take somebody else's thoughts or opinions wholesale. I think that it's very important to value your own experiences and your own ideas. So consider this a jumping off point. Consider this an invitation to think about something from an angle you hadn't maybe considered before. But that's all I'm trying to do here. It's just have some fun. Okay, so in order to have this conversation and make sure that we're all on the same page, I want to define the terms that we're using first. Specifically, let's start with comic relief, because that's literally in the title of the video. So you've heard the term comic relief before, and a lot of times when people use it, they're talking about the funny character in a serious story. Like, this is a very serious story, and this person serves as the comic relief. But let's actually break it down and look at not necessarily what we are used to associating the term with, but what it actually means. Okay, so obviously it has something to do with comedy or humor because it's got comic in it. But what does relief have to do with it? So Merriam-Webster describes comic relief as a relief from the emotional tension, especially of a drama, that is provided by the interposition of a comic episode or element. So specifically, it's something comedic that comes in, that's a change in tone to alleviate the tension of drama, or what the previous or primary tone of the story or the experience is. Okay, so picture this. You sit down to play Undertale for the first time. You don't know what you're getting into. And so the introduction with the humans versus the monsters feels dramatic and serious. You have this music that's kind of setting the stage, but pretty quickly you're having silly misadventures with Toriel. The ruins don't really feel ominous or dark. It's not a drama or a tragedy right from the get-go. Like, there's kind of this undercurrent of things that are not quite right. Like, you know, there's a mystery. Why are there these dusty shoes? Who is this woman? Why is she all alone? Why does she seem a little bit controlling? Where did everyone else go? There are people who thought that Toriel was creepy and untrustworthy from the beginning. I was not one of those people. I took to Mom immediately. I was pretty attached to her, and I think a lot of players are. But then you get to the basement, which is off limits. The music stops. Mom is serious. She tells you to stop, and this is the first time that this whole you can play this game and not kill anybody thing gets tested. So some people kill her, sometimes by accident, sometimes intentionally. Sometimes they are horrified by what they've done, and so they load the game and have a little conversation with Flowey, as I understand it. Some people like me are lucky and they notice that after you get low in health, she stops actually targeting you and you can get through the fight without violence, like Toby Fox has promised. But regardless of which route you take, for a lot of people, it's a pretty emotional experience. The fight with Toriel sets the stage for Undertale. It lets you know that as funny and as silly as this game is, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna go places. Like, this is not going to be a lighthearted experience all the way through. The door closes behind you, and you are just like aching with this sorrow and regret and fear. You're heading into this dangerous unknown. The world is big and scary. You've basically taken emotional damage. Flowey shows up and he mocks you, and he's really unsettling and kind of terrifying. And then you step outside and it's even more ominous and scary. It's framed like a horror story. Something is sneaking up behind you. The music is building. You walk across a bridge and... Sans. Comic Sans. Like, okay. So this encounter with Sans is this total sudden break in tone. Toby Fox has built this emotional peak, and you are hurting and you are afraid, and suddenly in comes this jokey skeleton weirdo and his whoopee cushion. Like, okay, I'm not even somebody who usually thinks whoopee cushions are funny, but I laughed. You know, you need something to take this like exposed, aching little heart and give you a hug and kind of let you put those hurting feelings away. You need to laugh. After the fight with Toriel, emotionally, and then after this follow-up, you need release from those feelings. You need to laugh and let go of that in order for you to resume your adventure, get back to the kind of silly, goofy times that Toby Fox wants to give you. You couldn't have done that if Sans hadn't made you laugh. The emotional tension at that point was too high to be maintained, and you need the relief that he provides. So there's a bunch of moments like this throughout Undertale and Deltarune. Like, it's not like you get comic relief after every single serious story beat. But I feel like Toby Fox has a pretty good idea of when you're gonna need it. Okay, so another example that really stands out to me. If we're thinking about comic relief as relief from the tension of really, really highly uncomfortable or scary or sad moments, just thinking about Undertale, what do you expect is a moment that we most need that relief, that sense of breaking the tension? The True Lab, which frankly I think is probably one of the most emotionally intense moments in the game. So you're going through the True Lab and beginning to get a sense for just how messed up things are. It feels like a survival horror game setting. I don't play survival horror games because I'm a wuss, and I was concerned whether I was going to be able to make it through the True Lab because it was spooky town. You get this ghost in the shower. You get this ghost if you lay down in the bed and it reaches for you. And that's just on the scary side. On the emotional side of things, I don't know about you, but when I discovered those VHS tapes, I was bawling. And then you find this one creature, and it's just as weird and scary and unsettling as all of the other amalgamates. And there's this absurd humor as you deal with this strange dog mashup that kind of calls back to the humor in the lesser dog fight, for example. But it doesn't quite diffuse everything. You're still kind of on edge. And then suddenly, Dogsong. And I laughed so hard that I needed to take a moment because I couldn't play the game. It's another example in which the tension has ramped up so high on several levels. And then Toby Fox throws out of left field this moment of absolute humor that just breaks your tension and lets you laugh and lets you breathe and lets you get on with playing the rest of the game. Super effective. Comic relief doesn't have to rescue you from the feels. It doesn't have to relieve the tension of something that is heartbreaking and devastating, although Toby Fox, I think, does that very well. When I think of comic relief in Deltarune, another moment that comes to mind that I think is exquisite is the release of emotional tension of a different sort, I would be remiss in my duties as a queer fan of Deltarune if I didn't at least mention the incredibly wonderful and gay Ferris wheel scene. I could go on and on and on about what this scene means to me personally, and I kind of did when I played it. But for the purposes of this video, we have this really emotionally vulnerable moment between Susie, who has a hard time opening up, and Noelle, who tends to undervalue her own feelings. And for us as the player, there is a sort of discomfort and irony building up, because we know that both girls are present and that Noelle is kind of on the cusp of confessing feelings to Susie. In Noelle's mind, this is purely a dream sequence, so whatever happens here will have absolutely no repercussions in her real, actual, everyday life. But the Susie she's speaking to is not dream Susie, it's real Susie. And the tension for us as the audience comes from us knowing something that not all of the characters present know. And that's building to something that we all probably have some kind of feelings about, which is these two desperate, hopeless gay girls getting together. I don't think that the tension in this scene is emotional tension from the heaviness of what the characters are going through. And for us, the players at least, it's not sexual tension between these two characters who are clearly attracted to each other. The tension lies in this disconnect between what the characters know and what we know. And that tension builds and builds and builds up to the point where Susie almost asks Noelle on a date. And it's very exciting. And there's all this build-up and all this feeling, this complicated jumble of teenagerdom. And speaking of teenagerdom, what? Birdly what? In this case, he's not relieving the emotional tension of drama or tragedy. He's breaking the tension we feel with these other two by bringing in his horrifying, badly timed, like almost like excruciatingly timed, terrible comedy. Well, he's serious, but we're laughing at him. So comic relief makes it so that you, the audience, are less uncomfortable because the tension goes down. But there's another really, really fantastic benefit of comic relief that I think, as a storyteller, it's a really useful tool to add to your toolbox. Comic relief keeps a story from being just one emotional note all the way through. Like if a story goes from bad to worse, darker and darker, if it's just unrelentingly grim and tragic and hard the entire way through, after a while, the painful stuff stops hurting because you just kind of go numb. Comic relief gives you a break from that feeling of pain, discomfort, sorrow, so that when the hurt starts back up again, it hurts. Toby Fox is really good at that. If you take the example of Dogsong and that moment in the True Lab, ultimately the True Lab ends on an effective note, but if the entirety of True Lab was just creepy, creepy, dark, dark, scary, scary, sad, sad, I don't think you would take as much away from it, because after a while you would be full up, and the emotional moments that come later at the end of the lab wouldn't be as effective because it would just be a continuation of what's already been happening. I hope it's clear from everything I've said so far that I think that Toby Fox is an absolute master of both comedy and drama. Like, he makes me laugh and he makes me cry, and I would say he's equally good at both, which is not common. And he goes so deftly between them, exactly when he wants to change the tone of his game. He knows when it's appropriate to be silly, and he knows when he needs to be serious. He's not just a goofy, ridiculous troll, although he is that. He's also a really sensitive and empathic person who cares really deeply about his characters, about his story, I would say about people in general. I would say he is both of these things. As an example, let's take the item names in combat. Okay, some of you probably know where I'm going with this. So some of the names are very, very silly for most of the game. Take, for example, our beloved butterscotch cinnamon pie. By the way, if you're a baker and you've never made a butterscotch cinnamon pie, let me recommend. So for most of the game, it's butts pie. Haha, he said butts. And there's a bunch of other choices that he made that are very, very silly, and when you encounter them in combat, you laugh. But then you're fighting Asgore. And if you're me, you are openly weeping the whole time and dying over and over and over again. And the gravity and the tragedy of the situation is so heavy. This good, kind-hearted man who is trying very hard to do what's right for his people. He is so stricken by both grief over what he's lost and guilt for what he's done that he believes he does not deserve mercy. He refuses to accept mercy from you. Asgore as a character is written with immense compassion. This battle is designed to be absolutely devastating. It's the first time you have no choice but to fight. It, I think, took me several dozen tries to come to terms with that. And the whole time you're hoping for this Deus Ex Machina to show up and save you and Asgore. And it's this incredibly powerful moment. Is this the time for Butts Pie? No! No, my friend, it is not! And Toby Fox knows that. If you decide to try to remind Asgore of his estranged wife, you will find the item in your inventory is now called Pie, which is a much more appropriate name at this point because the time for jokes is over for now. That is one very clear, very obvious example, but there's another point I want to bring up that I think really illustrates just how good Toby Fox is at switching between comedy and seriousness. What a master, an absolute master he is at writing both of those. If you will indulge me, I would like to talk about one of my other favorite scenes. Let's skip to Deltarune, Chapter 1. Lancer. Our precious, garbage pail son. I love this little idiot so much, but he is not a serious person. He takes Sansa's whoopee cushion and goes like steps further. He eats things that he shouldn't. He digs holes. He calls people names that are not actually insults. He rides backwards on his on-fire bicycle. His dialogue is silly. And Susie. Okay, full disclosure, Susie is my favorite character from Deltarune. She has so much depth to her. Like, replaying the first chapter is great because then you know what makes her tick. You have this context to understand how deep and complex her personality is. You can see the pain underneath her decisions, her hopeless, like, you want to treat me like a monster? Fine, I'll be a monster. Like, the way she lives down to people's expectations of her. That's a whole other video I might make someday if you can tolerate listening to me gush about Deltarune and how it is all about characters caged by the expectations other people have for them, but I digress. What I mean to get at here is that Lancer is silly. Susie, at least on the surface, is silly too. Together, they are absolutely ridiculous. They give us the machine to thrash your own ash. The machine to thrash your own ass? So they really lean into Toby Fox's literary inheritance from Homestuck, which I have not read, but I have absorbed enough of it to know that it is very weird. They're over the top in action and in dialogue. They're like Team Rocket. They're funny, they're silly, they're weird. And you have this really silly, goofy romp with an undercurrent of sadness from Susie and kind of in the background on a first playthrough from Chris's perspective. And there's a little bit of sadness from Lancer, but for the most part, we're having a fun romp. For the most part, things are wacky and they are silly. And then you get to Lancer's dad. And this very, very silly, goofy, lighthearted, absurd, weird, Homestuck-esque dialogue gives way to some of the most gorgeous writing I have ever encountered in a video game. It's the sort of dialogue that I want to read out loud to you because I just want to feel the words. I want to taste them sitting on my tongue. Like, they are like poetry. Toby Fox, this silly little dog who makes obscure and possibly obscene Homestuck references and tries to pretend that he's just a goofy little weirdo, writes so beautifully. You that left us in the shadows, stripped of meaning, you dare return to torment us once again. Begone. We have found fresh purpose, for the night has appeared. Holy fountains whose shadows are creating a new world, our world. This is the writer who gave us Butts Pie and the machine to thrash your own ass. The fact that he can do both is so fucking cool. Now, overall, I feel that Deltarune skews darker than Undertale, which is mostly funny, with occasional departures into darkness and tragedy, which might be part of why Deltarune resonates better with my melodramatic soul. But Deltarune is still really funny. You know who's funny in Deltarune? This weirdo! This absolute trash dumpster fire of a man! The internet's loser weirdo husband! This walking embodiment of memery! He's funny, and he's uncomfortable, and he's a little gross and unsettling, and there's a whole lot of yikes in him. So tell me, why the hell is Spamton the character I cried the most about in Chapter 2? Why did fighting him give me chills? And why was that moment of clarity and quiet at the end of the fight so devastating and beautiful? Toby Fox, how dare you make me ugly cry over this like trash fire dumpster heap internet meme trash pile of a man? But seriously, there's an answer to these questions. And the reason is that Toby Fox approaches all of his characters with astonishing compassion and humanity. I'm gonna be a little presumptuous and act like I know the guy, because I feel like he puts enough of his own heart and soul into Undertale and Deltarune that we have a sense of who he is. He sees our capacity for goodness. He sees the way our pain shapes us, for better and for worse. I mean, he's definitely more than capable of laughing at himself. He can laugh with us, and he can laugh at us. But I would say that the fundamental core of his stories is that underneath them there is this strong, solid gold thread of love. Even the silliest comedic characters can offer pathos in these emotionally compelling stories. Even the most painful and darkest moments of the game are shot through with threads of humor. Do I think that Toby Fox intentionally sets out to say, hey, that was a serious thing, I should put some comic relief in? Honestly, he might. The interviews I've read with him show that he's really, really, really intentional about how he approaches his writing and what he does. But it's also possible he just has like really good instincts and this like intuitive understanding of his players and what they need and how they're feeling. Kind of in the same way that he uses his compassion and his empathy to understand and create such rich, complex characters. Maybe he understands what his players need emotionally for the same reason that his characterization is so good. But either way, like, it's effective. It's effective as hell. And I think he wants us to think he's silly. I think he wants us to look no deeper than the goofy, trollish little dog. But just like all of his goofiest, most ridiculous characters, I think there's a lot of heart underneath the jokes. At the end of the day, Toby Fox is a better writer than I am, possibly a better writer than I will ever be. And there's no shame in admitting that. He is a master of his craft. but so much of what makes him so good is not just like his skills, but I would say his heart. From a practical level, what I hope that I can take away from this as a writer, and if you're somebody who tells stories, what maybe you can take away from this, is a reminder that you can have lighthearted moments in even the most serious stories, and serious moments in even the funniest stories, and to be intentional about it, and to keep both humor and drama in your toolbox. But I think more than that, if there's one thing we can take away from Toby Fox, it is that if you're going to write something, do it with your whole heart and don't hold back. If you've liked this and you'd like to see more of these, I have some ideas for other videos. This is my first time doing anything quite like this, so maybe I'll dive in and do a few more. If you'd like to see me come up with stuff like this on the spot and you think that my flavor of literary analysis is interesting, this is basically what I bring to all of my streams. So please feel free to follow me on either Twitch or here on YouTube. At the time of making this, I'm currently pairing Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door and Disco Elysium, so like comedy and drama right there. But I really will tackle just about any game that I think has the potential to have a really compelling story that I can really dig into. This has been a lot of fun. We'll see kind of what the final version is like. Like, comment, and subscribe. Other than that, if you want to hang out with me and my friends in the Flutie Pies Discord, we talk about stuff like this. So I'll put a link below where you can do that. Bye!